Yeah, hello to everybody. Thanks so much for inviting me to this public inquirist. Thanks to Stenka and Ulrike and to Mick and Helena, and of course thanks to Kerstin to triggering this debate, which I think is really, really important and is touching many questions that are in my mind since many years. Stagnation in climate politics, demographic change, privatization of public space, social polarization, the plight of refugees. The challenges for our cities are enormous at the moment, and it's easy enough to fall into a state of paralyzed shock. As a curator, I'm asking myself, how can a curatorial practice be informed by these enormous challenges? And today I would like to share some first attempts. I would like to suggest a methodology of curating the collaborative city by reflecting on two recent transnational platforms of myself, meaning We Traders and a very recent project, Actopolis, that I will touch very briefly at the end. The call for a change of paradigm comes from many corners, among them the ecological critics of economic growth or the neo-Marxist theorists who demand a just distribution of goods. The outraged of Puerta del Sol, which you see here in Madrid, but also of Syntagma Square or the Tahrir Square or the Occupy sites all around the world. They drew a lot of hope during the last years, but they also drew a lot of criticism. Their inability or the lack of willpower to take shape and to form as a political movement was frequently titled as a post-political attitude that squanders away its potential for change. According to David Harvey, to claim the right to the city is only a stopover on the way to the revolutionary movement, and not until the scattered protests turn into a real movement can the status quo be overcome. After working with exactly some scattered initiatives and factions for many years now, I think we really have to find new models which don't refer anymore, don't fit anymore with the model of the social movement or the revolutionary movement that Harvey is referring to, which is coming from the 60s. And I think we really have to find new ways of describing what kind of movement is there in the society. What's very interesting about these places and these groups of people that since the beginning they have changed from a mode of protesting to a mode of what I would call a mode of do it together. So a lot of time they also link both modes. Not only the combination of protest and joint production is attempted, but also the reorganization of reproductive work. An example would be the Syntagma Square or also the Gezi Park, where people actually lived together. Actually, this Gezi architecture project is a very interesting one, but it would lead too far away, also ending up with the politics of the MoMA in New York at the end. But maybe we can discuss that as a side effect. When the Goethe Institute invited me in spring 2012, so 1 year after the protests and the occupation of the Puerta del Sol, they asked me to develop a project around the topic of city and crisis. It was rather open what to do. And I became almost immediately interested in these very small and scattered practices of city making. Research in cities such as Madrid or Lisbon revealed that a numerous self-organized urban initiatives had sprung to life in the context of the financial and the economical crisis and in the context of the austerity policy. They are very diverse, these initiatives, but I think you could find some common ground, and I think like the basic summary I could give of these initiatives is real people, real needs, and working with resources and technologies of one's own. I would just like to give you a very few, just like 2.5 examples of what kind of initiatives I was working with. So I was selecting them with 7 local curators or curatorial teams in the cities. We didn't make a call. So it was really about people who are informed and who are working with and collaborating with initiatives who are there since a couple of years. What I didn't want to do is to say, we do a call and you have to have a good idea, the new idea again, and again the new ideas. I really wanted to work with the potential which is already there and not force people to have this creative imperative all the time. That's very important. And so one rather typical example is the La Campa de Cepada, which many of you might know, very famous project meanwhile from Madrid. Long story short, there has been a public swimming pool which was sold off to an investor. The investor went bankrupt. He had torn down the swimming pool already, so he had this empty space remaining, which was closed by a fence. And after the Puerta del Sol meetings, some people met there and they started to squat and to do something like a big building workshop there. So there was one fraction which said we want to do a theater, we want to do a cinema, the other ones wanted more sports, the third one wanted more urban gardening. So there were different groups realizing their little spaces there. And they had an incredibly elaborated mode of direct democracy, of organizing themselves in an analogous way, but also in a digital way. For example, I think 2 years ago, they got the Prix Ars Electronica, this Prix for digital art, for their digital democracy platform. And they gave the Golden Nick, the prize, to one of the neighbors who always felt that there's too much life now on this plot, who always felt bothered with it, and says that he's the one who should have the prize. Yeah, here is he again, just Ariel. Just showing you another example from Lisbon in the Mouraria, a very central old district in the center of Lisbon, which is quite run down, but which is just on the edge of being gentrified in a massive way. Here you can see a group of US-American tourists with a brand marketing it as adventure tourism. You can see they have all their backpacks in the front because it's a very dangerous area and you have to be really careful for like drug trafficking and thieves. So it's really adventure tourism going into the Mouraria. And on the other hand, already 2 years ago, you could feel that capital is coming into this area, like EU money doing this kind of public art, but also different hostels. And so you could feel like in 3 years, this will be like Brooklyn or whatever. And there, Adrienne Ferrer is living. She's an artist who is living there since 20 years. And she started this kind of Cocina Popular, which is at the same time a neighborhood kitchen in a classical way, but which is very important, which is also kind of this training center. So she managed to find a sponsor for a professional kitchen equipment. So it's a training center for all the little restaurants nearby and also for some housewives who want to start a catering service, because she's telling them, you know, if gentrification is coming, your quality and your level of competence has to rise. And so we are learning it together, how to be better cooks and better entrepreneurs, and they also have some gardening project, cultivating their own herbs. So, and it's a very mixed economy of like getting money from some for this kind of training, getting money from participative budgeting from the municipality, but also getting money from the tourists who are meanwhile coming, because it has become a famous place. One last example from this We Traders project, which I brought for James, because we talked about it this morning, is a housing initiative from Toulouse. And what's so special about is what they are trying to do, that to make an interface between the French public housing system, the HLM, and some participatory process, and new models of ownership. So this means it's very complicated process. So one is that it's really participatory planning, that each family, many of them with a migrant background, get their most optimal housing facility. The other one is that it's paid by the HLM, by the public agency, but by paying their rent, at the end they are the owner of the apartment. So paying rent means something different in this case. So there are all the projects we have selected together are on this on the website in 7 languages, and so you can look them up. So there are about 35, which we included into the VTraders platform. And after gathering all these projects and before starting, I tried to summarize so what's special about these projects, which are very different. You know, we had some projects which really believe in crowdfunding, and other ones who really fight for the welfare states and everything in between. So we really tried to gather also different ideologies and different ways of approaching things, because we thought it's very important to do that. And one thing which we realized discussing, so that all of them were talking not only about the financial crisis, but about the social and moral crisis. That was very common in our discussion. And what you could really also observe, that they were keen to switch from investor-driven to user-driven urbanism. And I think very important, we are still talking about participation. I think we have switched into a new paradigm, which I would call co-authoring. So people don't want to be asked for their ideas also. Many people, they want to do something. And the new question is about how to connect them and how to connect them to public authorities. And most of these initiatives, they are very hands-on, but they use all digital technologies, so it's really this mixture. So the question for me was, how does a platform for mutual knowledge transfer, which I wanted to establish, and a collaborative production, so it's not just talking, it's also doing, how would it look like? And for me, it was very clear that this question can't be answered by drawing a line between content and form. So I asked a designer, Rosie Epple, to help me, and together with her, I formed the formats of the platform. And we really tried to take the principle of co-production seriously and make it alive and also communicate it or make it experienceable to a big audience. The idea was based on my format of the working exhibition, which I'm developing since a curatorial method, which I'm developing since a couple of years. The working exhibition combines workshop formats in a recursive loop with representative formats. So that's kind of the core of it. On the one hand, the space of exhibition is used as a continuous location for discussion and as a workspace for assembly and negotiating. And on the other hand, a sensual mediation of the collective knowledge production is kept in mind by all participants all time. This way, I think a third space is created which sharpens perception and spurs the imagination. I'm just showing now a very, very few tools we have worked with. We have identified for a book we are just preparing, which is almost there, we have identified 50 tools we have been using through this process, but I'm just showing you. It started with the question, how can you co-curate with 7 curators? And even for that, we formalized all the hundreds of projects we had on the table. So we really brought them on the table and we made them a kind of perceivable. And we said we had this little VTraders casino where everyone could bring tables for and back, and just to find a central way of negotiating among the curators. We collaborated with very representative institutions in each city, like in Madrid with the Prado. We did that on purpose. So, we are not only the kids on the street, so we are in the heart of society. Or we did some workshops where we really kind of were almost on the street, so really kind of getting this public interaction. And we had many, many tools that were developed like this. We called it the do-it-yourself statistic, that they came out of discussions how how to mediate the crisis. What is the crisis in the city in our exhibition? And first we started off with all these EU figures and statistics like youth unemployment and GDP, and then people started saying, I don't know, this is so boring and so stigmatizing. They will say, okay, you in Spain, 50% youth unemployment, you will never make it, and they're so sick of it. So we started we decided to ask the visitors in the exhibition to give their opinion about how the crisis feel like, and we had a whole bunch of questions which also differed, of course, from city to city, which were always developed locally. Yeah, and the exhibition was actually very pedagogical. Some said it reminded them a little bit on early group material things. So we had these very short videos really explaining each initiatives made by each initiatives, like who they are, who is working together, what economy they are using. It really like 1, 2, 3, 4, like how to do it, like a manual. But we also had these very kind of haptic objects that everyone was contributing, like the Campo de Cebada was contributing this machine where you could make keys in the exhibition, because they are out of legal reasons they have to keep the fence, otherwise it's a question of insurance, and so in our exhibition everyone could make his or her own key to open the fence of Campo de Cebada. And we also had this way of a lot of like different information, and you could all collect it and make this kind of do-it-yourself catalog and stuff like that. And very important, and I think this connects very much to what Kirsten was showing us, we had this situations of assembly in each exhibition, just right in the middle of the exhibition here in Madrid, which were always locally produced, like here by Zuluark, a Madrid-based group. They called it the We Traders Parliament. It was done in a collaborative workshop before the exhibition, and many initiatives just used it to meet there, just in their daily routines, their daily meeting. And like in Turin, we got this table from Pistoletto. He wanted to put it into the exhibition, and he said, you don't have to take care, whatever you do, just use it. Was very kind. And we did cooking in the exhibition, just hanging around, dancing here in Turin also. And so it was really, a space. We talked a lot about, and I think you can discuss that later with Andrea, what kind of space is it? Is it a public space in the institution? We also said it's very much about public time, which you can spend in an exhibition. And this question of public time is very interesting. I will come to that later, because who does have this public time to engage in with such projects? Isn't it just like a hipster's hobbies, or what is it? Yeah, and here again, the question of using prominent spaces like in the Matadero in Madrid, or the Beaux-Arts in Brussels. And also really being behind the press work, like in Madrid we got 3 pages of El País, and got then after that 20,000 visitors in 6 weeks. Like with numbers it's always difficult, but still it was a big surprise that this kind of exhibition is attracting such a crowd, and also like pointing to something which is really on the nerve. So what I would say, like after 3 years of work, what really were our central questions which we couldn't solve was, one, how to create continuation. It was also asked before. Not the continuation of the We Traders platform. I think that's not really what I'm interested in, because I see it more as a trigger, but for the initiatives. They all said it's easy to start an initiatives, like the first 1, 2, 3rd year it becomes difficult. And for example, like Campo de Cebada, now they managed to get some art mediation fund just to have some people paid for their work there, who is doing all this reproductive work, which is necessary for a project like that. So very interesting question. Another one which we discussed a lot was the question of antagonistic tactics and strategies of solidarity. I think especially in the arts and also in urbanism, we have cultivated so many hit-and-run strategies in the 80s, 90s, and it's always about intervention, about irritation, about conflict, like after La Clau move. And a lot of people really now have the feeling that we need kind of safe spaces, we need solidary spaces, and I think this yeah, I think this changes the way of working together. And another question which is crucial, I think, is really the relay of self-organization and public administration. I think I'm not interested in a neoliberal line service that we say, okay, it's great, they're all doing it themselves. So I think we really have to find this interface between formal and informal practices. I think this will be something, and institutional knowledge and non-institutional knowledge. And like this finger in the bucket that Kerstin was talking about, which I find is very, very important with projects like this. Yeah, then another thing which we were kept on discussing, and which of course we couldn't solve, who is the we, who is in, who is out, like what kind of alliances are really possible. And the question, I think, of format, of like how to go public, so also the question of semantic space that an exhibition and a practice is producing, which I think is as important as other features. Yeah, I would just like to tell you that we are also preparing a book now, the e-book now, so not a PDF, but a really interactive hybrid e-book with many videos and things, and really like a rereading, not a documentation. I'm almost out of time, huh? Or do we have another 5 minutes to, yeah? Huh? 4? So, to shortly trigger, just a project which has just started a year ago or 1.5 ago, Octopolis, the Art of Action, which is very much like after the experience of We Traders, so I thought this time I start a little bit differently. So we start with a discussion on methods, so it's really a lab for discussing artistic and urban methodologies, like discussing all these questions about, what is the public sphere, what is the public relations between public, private, collective, alliances, just the ones I have just mentioned, our self-organization, what does it mean? These are the cities who are involved. It has become a very political region meanwhile, since we started, like Mardin on the Iraqi border in Turkey, and all the cities from Athens you could see. And yeah, it's very funny, we also worked in a supermarket or in a shopping mall in an old, this time like one workshop we did there, the biggest one we did in Oberhausen in Germany. But it was very difficult to get it, also it's vacant for years because it was sold and sold and sold, and now it belongs to an Irish investment fund at the moment, and they were not interested at all in opening up for it, and they wanted a hell of a rent at the beginning. It was very strange. So we did something, just showing it briefly, very similar that you did, and just trying also to organize out in this kind of mental geography and also economical geography we are in, and also again cooking, drinking heavily, and using different formats to exchange. And you can look at all the projects on our website, which is still in progress. We are just building it up. But I think what's important is what we are really talking about at the moment is, so there will be projects this year which are realized in all the 7 cities with different curatorial, artistic, and urbanistic teams. And in 2017 we will have again a traveling exhibition. And the most important topics are, of course, migration at the moment, nationalism, self-organization, public realm, I talked about that, and very important, the question of urban citizenship, or some co-curators also talk about performative citizenship. So can you use this kind of initiatives and this kind of practices to work on models of, or way of different kinds of citizenships? Yeah, okay, I think I leave it here.